all that out of the way, let's get into our first topic and let's talk about Resident Evil. So y'all already know we've had many iterations of Resident Evil. We had the movies with Mila Jovovich, and her husband was directing all those films. And some people feel like that he was just giving his wife a damn job. But look, apparently, because she also has a new movie coming out with Dave Bautista that he's directing. I don't remember the name of it. All I remember was I saw the trailer, and the trailer, it just looked so much like bad CGI. Like everything was done in front of a green screen. It looked like y'all had like a $20 million budget and was um trying to make a $100 million action sci-fi film look like something, but it looked like y'all only had like a $20 budget to make everything happen. So it doesn't look very good. But then again, when it comes to Paul W.S. Anderson, do we expect anything good to come out of whatever he makes? Although I will say he's made a couple of movies over the years that I relatively enjoyed. A guilty pleasure of mine will always be the original Mortal Kombat from the 90s. I actually do like the first Resident Evil. And there's elements of those films that I like, but for the most part, y'all have deferred so far away from the lore and what the games are and the tone of the games and stuff, that it was just like I'm over it. We need a reboot. And then they tried another reboot with Welcome to Raccoon City. That one was okay, but I was left relatively disappointed. And don't even get me started on the Netflix series with the late, great Lance Reddick. May he rest in peace. They made a movie, they made a series with him. I couldn't even get out past the third episode. I'm like, this shit is terrible. But nevertheless, if they say if you first don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again. Who said that? Oh, it was Aaliyah. May she rest in peace. So, I guess I would say third time's the charm, because it was like the original was first time they did it, but then it's like, or should we say fourth time is the charm? Apparently, I'm not good at math today, but now we have the director of Barbarian who is going to take on rebooting the franchise, and I have to say, I actually finally got high hopes for Resident Evil. Then I saw, speaking of which, before we even get to the story, there's a trailer. I don't know if people have seen it, of George Romero was supposed to work on a Resident Evil movie and it never happened. I believe they did a documentary on it and that is supposed to be coming out. So I've been seeing those trailers all around. So there seems to be like this big resurgence on Resident Evil, and rightfully so, because there's so many amazing characters in that series that we definitely need a reboot. So it says, in what seems to have become the first major auction of the year, an intense bidding war is underway for a reboot of Resident Evil, the horror action movie franchise based on the popular video games. Now, Zach Cregger is attached to write and direct. Now, as I said earlier, Zach Cregger directed a film called Barbarian with Justin Long, and Bill Skarsgård. I forget the girl who was in the movie, but the movie was relatively good. I thoroughly enjoyed Barbarian. And where I thought they was going to go with it, he totally changed my mind. Because I was just like, I thought the bad guy was going to be Bill Skarsgård. And I guess because he's kind of been typecast at certain points. But the twists kept coming, and I was relatively surprised by this film. So I think like Zach definitely did a great job with that film. So he made me a fan of what he does. So they also said 4 studios are elbowing for the win, among them Warner Brothers and Netflix, according to sources. Please don't go to Netflix, because after, like I said, what they did with that series, please don't go to Netflix. And especially the bastards over there keep raising their damn prices. They just raised the price again. So now Constantine Film, excuse me, which I believe is actually producing that horrible ass movie I was telling y'all about, that's coming out with Mila Jovovich and Dave Bautista. See, it's so bad, I don't remember the damn name of the movie. But if y'all know, drop it down in the comments. So Constantine Film, which has held the screen rights to the title since the late 90s and has been behind the previous movies, will produce the reboot along with PlayStation Productions. Shay Haddon, who worked on John Wick Chapter 4 and Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, is co-writing, which that's another reason why I've got high hopes. First of all, y'all already know I love the John Wick franchise. And Army of the Dead, I was really hoping that we were supposed to get a universe out of that whole thing. But then Netflix decided to scrap it. I really wish they would have went along with that instead of Zack Snyder's other horrible-ass Rebel Moon franchise. I hated those movies. Those, in my opinion, were 2 of the worst films of 2024. The Scargiver, I believe, I would say The Scargiver was the worst. Even though it's hard to kind of like on the Kinsey scale, which one was the worst? They both were pretty bad, but the Scar Giver takes the damn cake if I had to choose. But I saw so much potential in the Army of the Dead franchise that I'm like, can y'all really reconsider and then bring that back? Because I like, I'm a big fan of like zombies and all this other stuff, and I like where they were going with that. So there were some pretty cool ideas there, and which they had on board to help out with the writing. I feel like we may be onto something here. Now, the movie's six, starring Mila Jovovich, plus one origin feature made during the pandemic, have made money makers, but Cregger is the reason studios are willing to shell out major money. Now, Cregger is an actor and comedian, which I did not know that he was an actor and a comedian before he reinvented himself as a filmmaker. That was some news to me when I found that out. So, after Barbarian was a huge, hit amongst the horror movie aficionados and horror movie fans, it basically established him as a new voice in horror. And when he came out with his follow-up horror project, a bidding war erupted. So that film is actually called Weapons, and it's going to star Josh Brolin and Julia Garner. And I believe that Warner Brothers' new line, well, actually Warner's New Line division has picked that up, and he's become, as they say, a Final Cut director. So now they said the word on Weapons is that it's very strong and has been testing quite high, according to resources. And Warner's, which has not yet dated the movie, is likely doing everything it can to keep Cregger in its talent fold. And you have to realize also Barbarian was a Warner Brothers movie. So Warner Brothers like, okay, this guy so far, he's come out with some great ideas. His original content, Weapons is an original film. Barbarian was an original idea and it was a cult hit. And horror movies go over relatively well with fans. Like if there's one genre that you can constantly bet on with being, well, I won't say with automatically being successful, but having like the most loyal fan base would be the horror movie fan base. Because there's been some horror movies that was like, that was a choice. Like those Pooverse films. Don't even get me started on that trash. But but for the most part, it's like, yeah, I would definitely love to see Warner Brothers having a Resident Evil film under their umbrella instead of Sony. Because I believe Sony was a part of it at one point. Well, with Constantine Films and stuff, I believe they were at Sony at one point. And with Zach coming aboard, I really feel like this would be a marriage made in heaven, where we can see, especially because Warner Brothers has The Last of Us. So that's another video game franchise that kind of plays into the zombie world that Warner Brothers has attached to their situation. So they also said that the Resident Evil movies based on the Capcom games were a mix of, well, we already know it's a mix of horror, sci-fi, and action. So it said it followed the adventures of a heroine who fights zombies and the Umbrella Corporation. Well, that was the movies. That's not necessarily the game, because it's not. First of all, a girl named Alice don't even exist in the games. And that's what was kind of irritating me, because if you want to bring in a new character, you know what? I never really thought about this before, but Alice kind of reminds me of like, did people have the same energy towards an Alice being a made up character? Because they were kind of playing into the whole Alice in Wonderland situation, which was the elements they were doing in the original movie, versus when y'all were going in on Louis Tan as Cole Young in Mortal Kombat. Like, I feel like more people were pissed off about Louis Tan than they were about Mila. And I think it's because a lot of us grew up watching Mila in films like The Fifth Element and so many other films that we kind of gave her a pass. But I don't know. Maybe y'all need to refresh my memory. Were people that upset when y'all had like this made up character and she became more the dominant force? And I know a lot of people wanted, where's Leon? Where's Jill? Where's Chris and Claire Redfield? Where's Ada Wong? Why are we really getting these characters in these films? We did eventually start getting them throughout, but I felt like that a lot of their characters were playing secondary to Mila pretty much and getting to do everything. She had to do the action, she had to do the acting, and her acting could be questionable at times. But I felt like Paul was trying to push her to be in front of the forefront of everything and wasn't really leveling out everything for everybody else to do. So what Zach has said is that the revamp will take the title to its hard roots and be more faithful to the initial games, which date back to 1996. So if that's what's going to happen, then I will say that I will definitely be here for this reboot. And for those of you, I know a lot of people hate on the Resident Evil films. the movies have made $1.2 billion worldwide. So say what you want about these films, but they make money. And at the end of the day, whether or not the films are terrible, whether you hate them, because I know a lot of people do not like these films, but I have a lot of friends who love these movies, and it's a lot of gay guys. But I think it's because we like watching women kick ass on screen. So mostly it resonates with a lot, and a lot of like people that are into like genre fans or other stuff. So people don't really mind them. I'm not saying that they're perfect because they're not, but they make a ton of money. And it also says, well, so to wrap this up, it's like, you know what? Um, the movies aren't good in my opinion. They and at times they were like Paul would create lore, and then later on in the film, he wasn't even abiding by the very lore that he created for this universe. So that was kind of always the irritation for me, especially when he changed up so many times on how people were infected and the things that the Umbrella Corporation was. I'm like, do you not keep a black book of all the? Do you not keep like a little chart or a list of some of the stuff you actually come up with, and just go back to that, so that way there's it's within the same timeline, and you're not just pulling stuff out your behind thinking that we forgot. So uh in a way, I was even say they're guilty pleasures of mine. There's some I'll pop on just to watch just for fun, but it's not like I gotta, you know, it's not rocket science when you're watching those. But the one I forgot to mention, I mean, that I did mention, I'm sorry, but I did mention it. The Welcome to Raccoon City, that movie was directed by Johannes Roberts, and he directed 47 Meters Down, The Strangers Pray at Night, which was, the latter was not a good movie. 47 Meters Down was okay. Strangers Pray at Night was not good, but it was better than that chapter one that they just came up with. That was something. And that film starred Kaya Scodelario, who's in Kroll as Claire Redfield, Hannah Joan Kamen from Ant-Man and the Wasp. She played Jill Valentine. Robbie Amell played Chris Redfield. That's the cousin of Stephen Amell. And, fans and critics didn't like it. And like I said, I wasn't one of them. I think I had a roommate that pretty much he thought it was all right, but I didn't particularly like it. I thought it was disappointing. I like the fact that they incorporated stuff in the games, but it just didn't feel like a real Resident Evil movie. So I'm confident we can finally get a proper Resident Evil adaptation. And I'm looking forward to seeing when this movie gets made. And shout out to you, Mila, and what's left of your career. So, what do y'all think of this story? You guys excited that we're getting a new Resident Evil movie? That's going to be coming. Well, who knows when it's coming? First of all, they got to get the script done, and they'll probably start filming it later on this year, and then maybe we'll get it in 2026, more than likely 2027. My thing is, I'm ready for a reboot. If y'all got a new idea and y'all can make it real cool or whatever, then I'll see it. And I'm also looking forward to whenever this. I mean, I don't even know if the documentary, the one that George Romero, that he was actually supposed to make a movie of Resident Evil, but it got scrapped. I'm wondering when is that documentary coming out? Because I definitely want to check that out. So let me know what you guys think of this story in the comments down below.